This is a talk that I give at pain clinics. I've been presenting it for 3 to 4 years now, and we get a lot of requests from our clients to have this video made available for their family members and friends to see. So I thought I'd record it for that purpose. When I was approached to write this talk, I was given very broad guidelines. They told me to just talk about my mindset and how I manage my symptoms and conditions, because even though it seems normal to me, it's not the common approach used by most people. But my mindset now is very different from what it once was. So in order to let you know where I'm at now, I have to let you know what I've come through. In 2009, I had a fall and I landed upside down on my neck. For a while, everything seemed okay, but pain progressively increased in my right arm and my function began to decline. By early 2011, I could barely use my right arm anymore, and in mid-2011, I had shoulder surgery. During surgery, the nerves in my arm were damaged, and as a result, my pain skyrocketed and my function became non-existent. In the attempts to fix me, I was left with a condition called complex regional pain syndrome. That pain was so intense that I would vomit. Pain led me to clench my jaw so tight for so many years that I eventually ended up shattering the back 2 pairs of molars on either side of my jaw. My arm couldn't be touched. I used to have to cut the collars and sleeves of my shirts, and I slept with my arm wrapped in the cords of the blinds so that it was suspended and didn't touch the bed. I didn't and couldn't use my arm for 18 months post-surgery. My doctors told me that they were unsure if it would ever work again. So it was at that point that I pleaded with 3 different orthopedic surgeons to amputate my right arm. At this point, I was 21 years old and I had not long lost 85 kilograms. So I asked myself, is this going to be enough for you? Are you prepared to have only come this far? After everything you've been through to get to this point, are you prepared to let pain put a full stop on how far you'll go? Because I had spent the previous 10 years sitting on the sidelines of life as a morbidly obese person, and I was not prepared to sit on the sidelines of life again. I thought if this was the game that I had to play, and for whatever reason, then fine. But this time around, I was going to be a participant in my life. So I dug my feet in and I refused to drag a useless arm around with me for the rest of my life. I told them if they wouldn't remove it, then I was going to make it work. And they were very unconvinced. But the fact was, I wasn't prepared to lose anything more to pain. Pain had already taken so much from me, and there was nothing that they could do to slow it down. So I decided to get in the way, and from that day on, I took over control of my treatment. That day I drove one-handed to Rebel Sport, and I asked the sales assistant to help me load every set of dumbbells from 1/2 kilo up to 5 kilos into my trolley. And I went home and I took out my old physiotherapy exercises and I got to work. But at first I couldn't lift a thing and it did hurt, but I persisted. The thing that convinced me that I should try something different and test out everyone's favorite statement that pain does not equal damage was the fact that my worst pain was recreated every time something touched my arm. And I'm talking about really harmless things like my shirt sleeves or the bed sheets. And I soon began to understand that my nervous system was confused, because even when treating my arm as a fragile and delicate thing, I still couldn't protect it from pain. So I decided to run an experiment and I used my arm. Now, using my arm did trigger pain, but it occurred in a very controlled environment because I knew that there was nothing structurally wrong with my arm, because I had had it scanned about 20 times and they couldn't find a damn thing wrong with it. So I pushed through. I thought if it hurts that much just resting on a pillow, then it's just going to have to hurt. But I was going to make it functional. And after a while, I realized that when I exercised and when I used my arm, my pain decreased. Exercise became a far better medicine than any pill that they ever gave me. It wasn't quick and it wasn't pain-free, but neither were my medications. It took a long time of consistent and dedicated training, but eventually my pain was sufficiently managed with exercise. In 2014, I went back to work, but my legs started giving way on me, and I'm again experiencing a lot of pain in my left leg and my back. The investigations into that revealed that at some point along the line, my back is or was or had been broken. I found that news really hard to deal with, mostly because I had literally just gotten the use of my right arm back, and I felt as though I was approaching the finishing line on my time as a rehabilitation patient, and then all of a sudden I was catapulted back to the start line again. It took me a few months to get my head sorted, but eventually I reminded myself that I rehabilitated an arm that some of the best doctors and physiotherapists thought was beyond repair. So I bought some more fitness equipment and I adapted my programs for my new conditions, and once again I got to work. But I think it's important that I let you know and be honest that the pain that I experienced at that point in time has never left me, but my function has improved. Before I go on, I have a couple of disclaimers to make. I need to let you know that this is where the trajectories of our conditions part ways. So up until now, we're sitting side by side with each other and our pain was coming from relatively the same place or for relatively the same reasons. But I have an underlying condition. So I want you to know that it will be extremely rare for your health symptoms to mimic mine from here on. And I also want to let you know that I'm about to talk about pushing to have more scans done. But I pushed to have more scans done because my pain moved into other limbs. See, I learned my lesson from my right arm because I had every scan imaginable done on it, and every scan said that there was nothing sufficient enough wrong with it to account for this pain response. The conclusion was it was a nervous system fault and not my arm. Around 2015 to 2016, the longer that I had been in pain and the more that pain was spreading throughout my body, the more unconvinced I became that we actually understood the full extent of what was going on with my health. But I couldn't convince any of my doctors to look deeper into my concerns. They dismissed me, but they offered to write me some more scripts. So I went to university and I studied health and exercise science. And while I was there, my pain got worse and it continued to spread. My doctors told me that it was all in my head. They humored me by giving me a bunch of bullshit diagnoses. They told me that I would have to learn to live with my pain. I begged them to help me, and they declined. So I replaced my entire medical team that year. In 2017, I requested to be taken off all of my pain medications. I had been on them for years, and my pain was getting worse and not better, and it was getting worse fast, or at least too fast for my liking. And I was worried that my pain would get worse if I went off my medications, but I also knew that there was no shortage of doctors who would be more than willing to start throwing prescriptions my way if it did. But my pain was no worse off my medications than it was while I was on them. And to this day, I still have not reintroduced regular pain medications. Exercise was and is still my primary treatment option. At the end of 2018, my pain spread again, and this time it moved into my left arm. This time I was sure that I could convince someone to listen to me because my left arm pain couldn't be explained away the same way that my right arm could be, or my left leg, or my back. But still, no one listened. I graduated at the end of 2019, and in 2020, after ruling out almost everything on my own, I forced them to scan my left arm. And it was finally revealed that I had and have a condition called multiple sclerosis. The first thing that I did after they told me that I had multiple sclerosis was consult the literature for exercise interventions for neurological conditions, because by this point I had trust issues. Mainstream medicine proved to me a long time ago that it was extremely limited in its ability to account for and treat my pain. And there was no way that I was taking on something as big as MS without the greatest treatment option that I ever had. But I want you to know what I accomplished even though I was in pain. I don't want you to count yourself out the same way that my medical team did to me for all those years. And I don't want you to count yourself out the same way that I did to myself either. I told you that I went to university, but what I didn't tell you is that I came first. And I didn't just come first in my year. They told me I was the most impressive student to ever complete my degree at that university. I rehabilitated an arm that some of the best doctors and physiotherapists thought was beyond them. They gave up when things got hard, but I decided to back myself. They were limited in their knowledge, so I expanded mine. And if I did it their way, I would still be in a sling, and I would have spent the last 13 years sitting at home, drugged out of my mind on opioids. Instead, I became valedictorian, and I'm a university tutor for the next generation of doctors and physiotherapists and exercise physiologists, and I'm doing my best to educate them to be better and more empathetic health and medical practitioners than the ones that we've had. And I'm continuing my postgraduate education because I am not convinced that the health system has changed enough, and because there are not enough people like you and me sitting on the practitioner side of the table leading our treatment. My takeaway message for you is that there is life alongside chronic pain. Things are by no means easy and they are not fair, but it doesn't always have to be unattainable. I think it's really important that we don't count ourselves out, because I think that there are enough people out there who are already more than willing to start putting nails in our coffins, and I don't think that we should help them. This next part has been added because we realized that people were getting a little too caught up and too overwhelmed with the way that things unfolded for me, that they lost sight of the message that I was trying to send. So I want to let you know that we don't expect you to have to do what I did. I'm not here to tell you what you should or shouldn't be doing, or to judge you for how you go about things. I'm not trying to convince you that I'm right and that you're wrong. I just simply want to share the perspective of someone who knows a little bit about what you're going through, just in case it helps you consider things from a different perspective. Which brings me to the hardest question that I ever had to ask myself, and one which took me a few years to really answer truthfully. And that is, would I do it all again? And my answer is no, because I let this consume me. I didn't take my eye off it, not for a second and not for 10 years. But while I had my eye on it, I didn't see all the things that it was taking in the background. And before I knew it, it had cost me well over $400,000. I lost my chance at a home and a family. I lost contact with all of my friends, and I had to give my dog away. The day they told me I had MS, I didn't even have anyone left to tell except for my doctors. It became my sole purpose, and it became my identity. And before I had time to realize it, it was the only thing that I had left. The most relieving day was the day that they told me I had MS, because I knew that I couldn't beat it. At least not at the game that I thought I was supposed to be playing for all of those years. because I thought beating it meant having a repeat scan in which the injury or condition was no longer present. But I now know that that's not the case. I now know that once an injury is present, that it is likely to show up on a scan forever. But I also know that it doesn't have to be problematic forever. So, what would I do differently? I would have compromised and I would have adapted sooner. Because back then, all I could see was that I could no longer do things the way that I wanted to do them, or the way that I used to, or the way that everybody else could. So I stopped doing them and I found a new hobby, until it took that one too. And before I knew it, there was a list far too long of things that it took from me and that I walked away from. But I realized recently that the way through it is to take your eye off it from time to time. And if you have to be a patient, find time to be a person as well. Find time to get back in touch with the things that make you the person that you liked being. Learn how to coexist alongside of pain. Because if I push it away and I reject it and I fight against it, I never get to know it. I never get to know the things that make it worse and the things that make it better. I never get to know the things that I do to inflame or diffuse the situation. And knowing that gives me valuable information to survive it. If I stop seeing it as the enemy, I stop priming my nervous system to attack, and I give it permission to calm down in the presence of pain. And that way I can hold both experiences at the same time. I can be in pain and live a rewarding life alongside of it. That way my life doesn't stop because of it, and I am not reduced to just pain and its will.